This isn't women who are doing like the weird cleanses that were a thing 10 years ago. This is women who are eating the same, working out the same, nothing's changed, and suddenly their stomach just stages some kind of hostage rebellion. So what is happening for these ladies?
This is a great example of how hormone changes result in so much more than hot flashes and night sweats. And a lot of women, doctors as well, don't really put two and two together, right? So it's like, oh, we're having these digestive concerns, must be IBS. So there's actually an increase in IBS diagnoses here. But for a lot of women, it's just, and I can put just in quotes, the hormonal shifts and how they're affecting the gut that's resulting in some of these symptoms.
Welcome to Modern Menopause by Parlor Games. I'm your co-host Morven. I work here at Parlor Games, and I'm with my co-host Dr. Robyn Kutka. She is our consulting physician and all-round expert on everything from hormones to saliva testing to menopause struggles and so much more. Today's topic is even more embarrassing than that uncomfortable vaginal dryness and pain that you might start experiencing in perimenopause and menopause. It's the fact that you're bloated, you're gassy, you're constipated, and your stomach has gone just wrong, right? So this is really, really common. You know, Dr. Robyn was talking to us prior to starting this podcast episode about an astronomically high number of women who report digestive issues. And this looks like bloating. It looks like being constipated. It looks like, my guess is, more farts. It looks like acid reflux. It looks like just, I think, general discomfort, right?
Yeah.
And so this isn't women who are changing their diet. This isn't women who are doing like the weird cleanses that were a thing 10 years ago. This is women who are eating the same, working out the same, nothing's changed, and suddenly their stomach just stages some kind of hostage rebellion. So what is happening for these ladies, you know, where their stomach just goes sideways?
This is a great example of how hormone changes result in so much more than hot flashes and night sweats. And a lot of women, doctors as well, don't really put two and two together, right? So it's like, oh, we're having these digestive concerns, must be IBS. So there's actually an increase in IBS diagnoses here. And, maybe somebody does have IBS that's in this group. But for a lot of women, it's just, and I can put just in quotes, the hormonal shifts and what they're how they're affecting the gut that's resulting in some of these symptoms. So we can explore the hows here. So there's a couple different things happening. These hormonal changes can result in increased inflammation. They can result in a change in gut motility, so how quickly or not quickly our GI tract moves. They can affect our permeability, so what people might call leaky gut. Changes in our hormones might impact that. And then what's really interesting is, as we're becoming perimenopausal, menopausal, and our testosterone levels are changing, that might actually impact the severity of the discomfort that women feel. So the actual pain levels. Yeah. And when we think about this, there's hormones themselves play a role, and then hormones impact neurotransmitters. And we all think of, neurotransmitters, if we know what they are, as impacting our mood. So, our antidepressants work on neurotransmitters. But over 90% of our neurotransmitters are actually made in our gut. And so they can code for how quickly things move. Well, our hormones impact how we make our neurotransmitters. So we have these hormonal changes directly affecting gut motility, inflammation, permeability, how we're pain and sensitivity. And then we're also impacting our neurotransmitters. So it's kind of this double whammy, because together they kind of wreak havoc, and we have this new thing going on.
Right. Yeah. Well, and I think, you raise this really important point, which is there is this stereotypical characterization of perimenopause and menopause, which is you've got hot flashes, you've got night sweats, you're tired, you're not sleeping well. I think moody actually is also what comes to mind. I think even things like poor sleep kind of get a wee bit overlooked. I think that if you were to ask 100 men or young adults, what does perimenopause and menopause look like? They'd say hot flashes, women being bitchy, moody, like tearful, cranky, whatever. And that kind of thing. And like you're saying, actually there's these a whole plethora of other things that can happen that are actually very common. It's not the weird symptoms, right? Like tasting metal, ringing in your ears. Sure,
Right.
these things can happen, but they are less common. What was the statistic you said to me? It was something like over 90%, right? Like this is a huge percentage of women are experiencing this and are probably just attributing it to, I shouldn't have eaten that pizza the other night.
Right.
Or, oh, maybe maybe my salad was a bit off or whatever. And actually there is more going on. Tell me, for our listeners, what are some of the most likely things that women are going to start experiencing with gut changes, and what should they be looking for in terms of duration, actual challenges that they're facing to where they can start going, you know what, this isn't a bad salad, or I ate too much.
Yeah. Well, and we don't want to overlook something that,
Sure.
could be concerning. So of course we want to talk to, healthcare providers about this, your main docs. If women haven't had their colonoscopies and they're due, explore that. But I think one of the telltale signs here, similar to other concerns, is like, is this a worsening of symptoms or worsening of concerns or a new onset of concerns that's occurring alongside our already suspected perimenopause? So if it's coming with those changes, or our periods are changing, our cycle length is becoming different, and maybe we're already feeling a little bit more moody or having some hot flashes, and we have this too, it's a pretty good indication that hormones can be the culprit here. That's at least magnifying something going on. I do think women will end up going down, I'll call it a rabbit hole of like functional diagnoses, functional testing, trying to treat the gut microbiome. And yes, hormonal changes influence the gut microbiome, and the microbiome influences hormones. But people might end up with that type of testing, or maybe with a SIBO testing, or new SIBO diagnosis that seems resistant. I think that's key, is like, okay, we've worked up this GI stuff outside, colonoscopy was great, everything's fine. Now I'm going down SIBO, I'm going down the microbiome, I'm going, maybe a candida, blah, 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 blah. They're doing all these things, but the symptoms aren't getting better, or their concerns aren't getting better. Maybe they're getting minimally better. And this is kind of the aha moment where we have to think about, oh, wait a minute, what are my hormones doing? How are they influencing it? I remember years ago working with a woman who had been doing her own self-treatment of SIBO for a while. After working with a doctor for a long time, we balanced her hormones, and within a week of starting her hormone plan, her symptoms were gone. I mean, it was amazing. Wow. And here she'd been suffering that whole time. So it's not that she never had SIBO, she did, but sometimes those symptoms those concerns can overlap.
Nice. Okay. Yeah, that's super interesting. Well, and talk to me a little bit more about that gut microbiome role here, right? So women are having these digestive issues, things are starting to go wrong, it's impacting your microbiome. And so we often think, it sounds like what you're saying is, we often think, oh, something must be wrong with my microbiome, so I've got to fix that, versus no, something's gone wrong with your hormones, so now your microbiome's been impacted, which has this domino effect of neurotransmitters, right? Because it's your serotonin and your dopamine that are made in your gut, right? I believe. I mean, I
and GABA, I'm sure, is made there too, or there's at least GABA receptors. But
right. So these big neurotransmitters. So are there other things that women are likely to experience if they're also experiencing like a certain severity of digestive issues?
Well, I think absolutely. From our typical symptoms of mood and things, but one of the symptoms one of the concerns that we don't think about is how quickly somebody feels full. So I think what I see a lot of in my own practice is women complaining like, I'm never full, or all of a sudden I'm full really quickly. When there's a shift like that, quite often serotonin or changes in serotonin can be implicated. And then we go, why are there changes in serotonin? Because there's changes in estrogen. So anyway, that's one of those types of concerns that I see that we don't think about being associated hormonally. You asked about the microbiome, and I digressed to that. But,
sure.
Our microbiome is the kind of the critters that live in our gut, and they can be like many things, balanced or imbalanced. We can have enough, we can have too little, we can be missing something, we can have some critters that maybe cause symptoms. But one of the big things hormonally is, depending on what's there, it helps us to get rid of our estrogen. And so if we don't have an adequate, healthy microbiome, women may kind of recycle and resorb their estrogen through their gut. And so there are probiotics being studied for this. We'll see a lot like online and being talked about. I think it's Akromansia is like the newest, best one, and it's super important. But fiber is super important. Fiber is what feeds our probiotics. We talk about prebiotics. Well, prebiotics are fiber. And so, I think a lot of women aren't getting adequate daily fiber, and doing that can be if their guts can handle it. I know, people who are battling some GI stuff might have a struggle with fiber, but if that's not the case, fiber can be a huge component to helping with hormone regulation for women.
Well, and one of the other things you mentioned is sort of misdiagnosis here, right? Or not necessarily misdiagnosis, but pinning everything on the diagnosis, like pinning the whole problem on the diagnosis. And so you're saying IBS, right? IBS is one of these common ones. Are there any other ones where you're like, I know you mentioned SIBO and Candida. Anything else where women, it's like to be like, oh, it's probably, it's this or it's that. And actually it's, hey, this is your gut's kind of sending out the alarm that stuff's going on with your hormones. But when they go to get it checked out, in one of our other episodes, we actually talked about this, right? How women go in and they kind of get pushed and bounced around, and they don't get a lot of help with their hormones. If you're listening to this and you've not heard that episode, be sure to go and look through our other episodes. We talk all about sort of how women's hormones are very misunderstood. Women get bounced around. It's a bit of a black hole. It's definitely worth listening to. If you're wanting to share this with other people who might be struggling with these things, it's great to share the episode with them. But yeah, are there other things that women are going to hear, like, hey, it's probably this, or oh yeah, it's this, and actually it's not that it's not, but solving that issue isn't necessarily going to help deal with all the stuff that they're struggling with their gut?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple things I can think of right away. One on the GI side is somebody might be told that it's indigestion or acid reflux, just take this medication, which might help for a minute, but it's not the cause of what's going on. As we age, our stomach acid actually gets lower, which might be the cause for some women of some of their indigestion or heartburn type symptoms. And so these medications work on lowering it further, when in fact we needed to support digestive enzymes and things. So that might be one thing somebody hears. But from the hormonal aspect of it, I think women with other hormonal conditions, things like PCOS or endometriosis, maybe even adenomyosis, could experience some of these symptoms alongside their already known hormonal shifts and kind of just attribute it, oh, it's just my PCOS, oh, it's just my endometriosis, when in fact, yes, they're kind of both influencing each other, if that makes sense.
Wow, that's tough. That's tough for tough place to be, right? Where you're sort of, because like you say, like the lady that you said you had a client who had the SIBO, right? Or was it SIBO?
Yeah, SIBO.
And she was, it's not that diagnosis wasn't there, but it was the stuff that you're doing isn't necessarily going to resolve this issue without this additional hormone support.
Her hormone imbalance acted like a magnifier for her SIBO, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, and tell me, is there a particular hormone or group of hormones or hormone kind of picture that's going to be more likely to result in GI issues?
Well, I think there's two main ones. Three, let's say. Fluctuating hormone levels. Through perimenopause, as we have these ups and downs, we're on the hormone roller coaster, the brain's trying to wake up the ovaries, we get these big surges. Those ups and downs can result in some of those GI complaints that women have. We talked about estrogen and serotonin. Estrogen's role is to increase serotonin production, increase its availability, sensitivity in the receptors. And so as estrogen levels decline, that can be a big one, especially I think about for motility issues. But even before that, progesterone gets a bad rap here, but progesterone can be a game changer for some of these symptoms. Women often don't realize that because if anybody's been pregnant, we're a big bathtub of progesterone at that point, and a lot of times we feel miserable. We feel more nauseous, more constipation. Like, wait, you want me to do what for my hormone stuff? But like anything, it's kind of amount dependent. So for many women, these the type of progesterone that's available to them to help with hormone imbalances, that's going to be a lot less progesterone than say what we are during pregnancy, and that smaller amount oftentimes can help with some of their concerns versus giving them too much and having having those pregnancy type symptoms. So that can be a game changer for women too. So those are two big ones that I think about from a sex hormone perspective. Of course, I know we don't talk about it a lot here, but thyroid impacts this significantly. Thyroid impacts, if we're kind of running sluggish on our thyroid, then maybe there's some more constipation, more bloating, indigestion, versus if some women, and we don't see this very often in this demographic, but if women have extra thyroid hormone, let's say, they might tend towards more diarrhea or gas, things like that.
Interesting. Yeah, because I think that it's a challenge for women, right? Like we've talked about on other episodes is learning to navigate, and also learning to advocate for yourself and keep pushing. Like, hey, I tried this thing and it didn't work, and I'm gonna keep pushing. I'm gonna keep pushing because it puts a lot of pressure on women to sort of, man, I have to keep constantly going back, or I have to keep finding this specialist or this new person. Which, I'm not necessarily advocating against. I think I'm kind of saying, yeah, you have to do that. It sucks, but you do have to do it. And there is often a solution or more information out there. So one of the other things here, I think that we've not touched upon, because it's a wee bit different from GI issues, is the weight gain, right? Mm-hmm. Women experience bloating. Bloating is a common thing that's sort of separate from the weight gain.
Right.
But talk to me about the sort of difference, I guess, and the overlap here, because bloating's generally uncomfortable. It makes you feel like you've gained weight, right? And then there is actual weight gain. I can't remember what the statistic was, but it was
like
something
12 pounds.
Yeah, you've said it before, and I was like, wow, that's more than I would have thought, right? So is there an overlap here between GI issues, things like bloating, and weight gain?
I mean, technically, in theory, they're separate, but women, I think, interchange those words as if they're the same, because a lot of times where women will observe the increase in their weight or their actual physical change in their body is the belly, and so while there is actual weight gain, that typically tends to be oftentimes visceral or deeper fat around the belly with these menopausal years. There can also be the bloating, which is more of a gaseous bloating that can be more uncomfortable, but in the same area. So I think there's some overlap here that are makes women feel uncomfortable, but it's hard for them to discern, if that makes sense.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that, because that's sort of our first question on the agenda today. So we're going to shift over to some questions that we have from our listeners. For ladies listening right now, if you ever want to ask Dr. Robyn a question, you can find the link to the form in this episode. You can send Dr. Robyn a question of your own for a chance to be featured. You can always leave us a comment underneath the episode. Be sure to subscribe. Make sure you never miss an episode. Don't miss the answer to the question that you've been asking. But I'll switch over to this question because it ties in to our conversation, which is, how much of that stubborn menopause belly is actual fat gain versus bloating or inflammation related to hormone shifts?
Yeah, I think that's going to be person dependent. It can definitely be both. As our estrogen levels decline with menopause, our fat stores tend to migrate up. So we oftentimes will lose some of that fat around the hips and kind of increase the fat around the belly. In some ways, this is our body being smart. Fat is a new endocrine organ, so it can make estrogen there. But obviously, a lot of women don't like that. But then at the same time, we're experiencing symptoms of bloating with those estrogen shifts. And so we can actually have both going on here. And I think we can discern these from both can be uncomfortable, but where let's say the menobelly is a squishy uncomfortable, I'll use. The bloating is more of a gaseous uncomfortable. And so they can probably feel a little, while they do feel different, it's just a matter of whether or not a woman can discern them.
And what about this one? If I think my GI issues are hormone related, what should I be asking my doctor? And when does it make more sense to look at the hormone themselves instead of just treating the digestive symptoms?
Yeah, this is a great question, and I think a little complex. When we're having the GI symptoms, of course, we have to look at them of GI symptoms and rule out anything concerning. And this is where the current recommended age for like a screening colonoscopy is 45, and that's younger than what it used to be at 50. So, like if a woman hasn't done her screening, if making sure she's talking with her provider about these symptoms so they can rule out any kind of red flag symptoms that we would think about as being concerning for a more immediate GI workup. And if she is, in those perimenopausal or menopausal years and having these for the first time, the kind of red flags have been ruled out, then I think it makes sense to look at hormonal contributors here, and having that conversation with her doctor about what do hormone therapies look like for her. Is that an option to try? Because in those cases, it could be really beneficial in going towards her concerns.
I think it's got to be tough for women. I'm curious as to if women, in your experience, right, what are women hearing when they go to the doctors with GI issues?
Mm-hmm. Most of the time they're being told to take, in my experience, and these are the patients that come to me after having done this already, right? They're looking for support. So most of them have already been told to try an antacid. So our antacids are kind of the fix-all, try this and see if it gets better. That can be diagnostic, or in some ways it can give us some good insight into what's going on. But at the same time, that's not a long-term treatment for concerns like this. For other things, yes, people do use them long-term, but for concerns like this, when there's something else causing that, there are these other options that we can look at.
Well, and I'm wondering, yes, saliva hormone testing is amazing. You can see if your hormones are low or imbalanced. Are there other tests that women can take that are more specialized for gut health?
Oh, there's tons. When we're thinking about stuff like this, basic testing with our providers would be like an H. pylori test. That's the main bacteria that's associated with like peptic ulcer disease and things. So that's quite often tested for in our conventional circles. They'll get a colonoscopy, maybe an endoscopy, maybe even a gastric emptying study or something like that to see how quickly the GI tract is moving, depending on her symptoms. But if she's working with a doc in the functional world, this is where it shines. Like most naturopathic doctors, functional medicine doctors, things start in the gut. There's a saying, we were taught in school, was like everything starts in the gut. And so it's our second brain. So if something's off in the gut, then, it's usually manifesting and showing up somewhere else. So there are like stool tests where we can see what bacteria is there, in what amounts. Is it beneficial? Is it just hanging out? Is it bacteria that's causing stuff? What about yeast markers, digestive markers? There's breath tests for SIBO. I mean, there's so much out there. And so there's a lot of things that can be done here.
Yeah, because I'm curious for women who are experiencing this, right? Like you go get a saliva hormone test and it might tell you your hormones are low, but it actually doesn't necessarily paint that clear picture of, okay, now I know what's going on with my gut health. Oh, I can see that I have low, maybe I can see I have low estrol. I can see that I have low progesterone.
Yeah.
I don't know. Tell me, because women are, let's just assume that in this scenario, we're talking about women who are in perimenopause, menopause, they're struggling with a bunch of other unpleasant things like lack of sleep, brain fog, hot flashes, blah, blah, blah. They're stressed out. Does cortisol have a role here in this? Because I know that, stress can impact our gut. It can do funny things. Is there another layer there for women in perimenopause, menopause? They're dealing with all this stuff. They're stressed out. They're fatigued. Are there other hormonal components that can play a role here?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, with cortisol, I'm thinking of, there's probably more direct roles, but the one that right away what I think about is, when we're stressed, just being stressed alone is an inflammatory state in the body. And so our body releases chemicals called cytokines that impact the inflammation and cause inflammation. And then that stress, of course, affects cortisol levels. Cortisol is our body's own anti-inflammatory. And then when we are stressed, going a little bit further, stress and living in that stress state, we're not hanging out in our digest state. And we only have two, stress and digest. So when that happens and we're living in that stress state, we're shunting blood away from the digestive tract. We're working to get away from things. We're increasing our immediate cortisol response and, adrenaline response and things like that, which can impact how we digest and even basic things like blood flow to the gut.
So a lot of stuff can be impacted and a lot of things can be going on. Okay, unfortunately, that is all we have time for today. But if you are a listener and you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to hit subscribe and make sure you don't miss any of our other episodes. If you think that there's other women that you know in your life who could benefit, be sure to share. A big thank you to you, Dr. Robyn. I know that this was a lot. There's a lot of factors to this. I'm sure it's a topic for another episode to be revisited sometime soon.
Enjoy your day, everybody.